So how big was the Death Star? Yes. Yes, it was. See ya. No, of course, I'm not going to do that. Welcome back to the channel. And so in this video, I wanted to explore how big the Death Star was. And rather than just sort of throw some numbers in and this, that and the other, I thought, right, okay, can I make it visual? Like, see what the Death Star actually was like in our world. Now, I'm no visual effects artist. I've got literally no experience there. So I've tried to be creative in how I can bring this to life, bring it into our world. And so I've done some comparisons and I've put some sort of effects into, again, I'm no visual effects artist, but I am learning how to use certain editing techniques, and I've put this into this video, which, to be fair, has been kind of fun. And what I'm going to do is sort of go through it as we understand the actual scale, the size of this thing, because it's an absolute beast. But when you see it comparatively against some other stuff, you're going to go, oh God, it's tiny. So anyway, with that said, that's my intro. Let's get into it. So the first thing to do is understand the actual scale of the Death Star on its own. So let's go through that. Now I'm going off what is on, I guess, Star Wars Wikipedia or Wikipedia, and the actual diameter. So that's from sort of one side of the circle to the other is 160 kilometers. So that's what we're going to use as a base unit. And in this video, I am going to do a bit of rounding. I'll either round it down, round it up, because there's going to be percentages thrown, decimal points thrown in, and let's just not deal with that. There's going to be enough to deal with. So that's gone. But so the diameter is 160, which means the radius is 80. And anyone who's done remedial maths kind of knows that to work out the circumference is pi r squared. So pi r squared on 80 kilometers, which is the radius, is 502.6. So 503, let's just say 503 kilometers in radius. And I'm working on kilometers here because I'm going to use the metric system. I prefer miles. I do. I work in miles per hour in my car, but for this, I'm going with the metric system. So that's the scale of the Death Star. But how does that compare? Right. So I thought the best thing to compare it against is our own satellite, the Moon. So let's have a quick comparison in terms of the size of the Death Star to the Moon. So the Moon has a diameter of 3,475 kilometers, approximately. So I'm going to start putting things into scale now. So let's go with that. And so this is visually to scale. Watch what happens here, and you get to see how big the Death Star is to the Moon. And you kind of go, oh, bless it. What I've also done is worked out how many Death Stars you would need to span the diameter of the Moon. And we're going to watch that as well, but it's 22. So you'd need 22 Death Stars just to span the diameter of the Moon. Now that actually makes the Death Star look tiny, and what I'm putting in here is our Moon, and this is to scale, and the Death Star orbiting the Moon. And when I'm recording this, I'm not even sure if you can see it because I haven't edited this in yet. So I'm curious to know how this looks. You're seeing it as I'm going to see it. So yeah, there we go. But I'm going to pop that in now. And all this really makes the Death Star seem tiny. It seemed tiny, but it's not. We're just comparing it to something that is massive. So what we're going to do, let's go back to the Death Star. Let's go back to that and let's talk about how big this thing actually is. Like what it's still insane, guys. It's insane. So let's go back to the Death Star. So we've talked about the actual radius, the diameter, the circumference, but what we've talked about is the volume of the Death Star. The volume is obviously everything that's inside, so yeah, inside the ball, the sphere. Now, I am referring to my notes as I do this because I had to, but that is 2,144,660 kilometers cubed. Now that number don't really mean anything just to hear it. I appreciate that, but it's insanely big, and I need to sort of give a representation of how big that actually is. But we're going to start with something that makes the scale a little bit more understandable, and that's comparing the Death Star against the Executor. Now, the Executor is Darth Vader's ship. It's the Dreadnought Star Destroyer, the Super Star Destroyer, the one that actually crashes in. In fact, let's pop that clip in. And in that clip, the actual Death Star, there's no curvature on it. You actually would see curvature on this scale because of, again, the size of the Executor, but it would actually take, and again, I had to sort of work this one out, but it'd take 8.4 Executors across the diameter to go across to fill that space. Again, that's just purely on the diameter, and there's a visual representation of what that looks like. So the Executor is 19 kilometers long. 19, right? That is in an insane amount of distance. And so I'm going to pop in a visual representation of how far that is on Earth. And then you can get a feel for how far that is on the Death Star. So let's do that. So to scale the Executor and really get an understanding of how much of a beast even this thing is, what I've done is I've taken the Burj Khalifa, which is 830 meters tall, and I've put it next to, which we can see here, we'll put it next to the Executor. Now I've had to scale it down quite significantly. There are 23 Burj Khalifas in height to the length of the Executor, which is 19 kilometers, and I had to scale it down so small. I'll zoom in to show you, and it's at pixels at this point, but in Photoshop it's, but when you scale it down, it comes to 48 pixels. So it's absolutely the Burj Khalifa looks tiny, but that's just how big this thing is. It's massive. And again, we're only using this so that we can then use this against the size of the Death Star, which I'm going to bring into our world. But to give you an idea of how big this is, I'm going to go on Google Maps, and I'm using the UK because I'm in the UK, and I've just put it on top of the West Midlands, and you can see that this thing absolutely would dominate the sky. It would cover a city. It is absolutely huge. Now I've put it on Photoshop on Google Maps at ground level, so obviously it would look different perspective wise and all that type of stuff, but again, we're not going into that just for this. We're using the Executor purely as a measuring point, if you will. Well, we'll get back to the Death Star. So here we have the Executor flying across the sky from the orbital distance of the ISS. Now, bear in mind, the ISS is a dot. You can't make it out, it's just a flying dot. I'm sure you've seen it. So it just shows you how big the Executor actually is. Now I've used a comparison size against the moon. I've used angular size to work this out, and when I say I've used angular size, ChatGPT has used angular size. Because this maths is just beyond where I can go comfortably. So I put this into ChatGPT, and even it was like, okay, give me a minute here. But yeah, so as I say, the Executor is about 5.2 times the size of the moon in terms of its size perspective, based on it being in the orbital distance of the ISS. Bear in mind, obviously the moon's miles away, which is why it looks so much smaller. It's at 300,000 kilometers away. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do the same thing with the Death Star. So we're going to put the Death Star at the orbital distance of the ISS. And, well, this is what's coming next.
Like and subscribe, or I will destroy you.
Yo, dude, what are you doing? You can't just go around force choking people because they haven't subscribed yet. I appreciate the effort, but calm down. Dude, you do know how this works. If you kill me, then you go as well, you die as well. So let's not knock that on the head. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, maybe you should subscribe, so it don't piss him off anymore. So I genuinely thought to myself, I can put the Death Star at the at the orbit of the ISS, and I can't. I just can't do it. It's just too big, and so I've had to scale that back, and I've had to scale it back. So I've put the Death Star at double the distance of the orbit of the ISS. So I've put it to 840 kilometers out. Now again, that's not far away in reality. I appreciate that's not that far away. But this is what it's like from that distance. And now you get a scale of how ridiculously big the Death Star is. It's insane. And I really hope that this video has given you sort of an insight into what the thing is really like what the scale of this thing would be. And what I wanted to do as this thing is appearing in our horizon, is go through some of some information about the Death Star. Again, I'm going to relate it to our world. So with that, yeah, we're moving on to sort of factual stuff. But here we are. At this scale, at this size that you're seeing, we are at an orbit of 840 kilometers. The best thing that I can compare military-wise against the Death Star and the Executor and what have you is a aircraft carrier. And I've used an aircraft carrier because one, they're massive, and two, it gave me a realistic view of what the mass of something of that volume would be. Okay, and when I say the mass of that volume, what I mean is that an aircraft carrier is not based just one big solid lump of metal. There's a lot of open space in it, and there is in the obviously the Death Star. You know, there's corridors and hangars and all the rest of the stuff. Is not just one big solid ball. So I thought an aircraft carrier is probably the best thing to work against, and I use the US Nimitz because that's the biggest aircraft carrier that is currently in existence, and that thing is huge. So let's just bring up a visual representation of that, and I'll pop a picture of me as Darth Vader on there. I'm going to use some images of me as Darth Vader to kind of again put some representation in there. So let me bring that up. And so for scale, the US Nimitz is again a conversion but into metric, but it's 0.33 kilometers in length. It's so zero, it's not point, it's 0.076 kilometers in width, and it's 0.076 kilometers in height. So it's as high as it is wide, obviously a lot longer. But that doesn't really help in terms of like how big is this thing. So what I did is I thought, well, let's just take those maximum dimensions and make it a rectangle, okay? And so I'll come back to you on that. So taking those measurements, if we put that to a rectangle, then the cubic volume of that rectangle would be 2 million meters. Now I'm saying 2 million meters, so 2 million meters cubed, because kilometers cubed is 0.002, which sounds crazy small, but you've got to think a cubic kilometer is massive, right? And so yeah, it's obviously 2 million cubic meters gives you a bit of an idea of, all right, yeah, that's massive. Okay, so we're going to work with that. This is where you get a scale of how big the Death Star is. On that scale, approximately, you would be able to fit inside the Death Star 1,072,330,000 US Nimitz. It's like 1.1 billion inside it of the US Nimitz, okay? Now, just have a think about that for a second, right? There's like 9 billion people on the planet approximately, right? So imagine if we had 1 billion of these, of the US Nimitz kicking about. I think there's like 2. So I don't know, I hadn't checked that, but I think the US has like 2 of them. So imagine the 1 billion, right? That gives you a scale of how, right, you'd be able to fit 1 billion inside the Death Star. And this is where it kind of goes a little bit sort of crazy in terms of understanding, because the US Nimitz weighs, so its displacement weight is 100,000 tons. Now I'm gonna need to maybe I'm gonna try and recite this number. The Death Star, now obviously it's in space, so its weight is kind of meaningless, but if we were going to equate its weight to the gravity of Earth, so our 1g of gravity, it would weigh 1,072,330,000,000 tons. That's more money than there's in existence right now. It's a crazy number. And how much metal you would need to make the Death Star, how much it is absolutely insane. Again, that number that I've just given you, and I'm going to pop it on the screen, that number is sort of based off taking the US Nimitz, which again is not a solid block, so that is a relatively accurate description. The Death Star is massive, it's huge. When you compare it to the Earth, the Moon even, and the Moon's pretty big to the Earth, but yeah, it looks tiny. And I've done that for a bit of realism, a bit of comedy, to be fair, just to sort of like get a grasp on it. But in reality, if you think about it, against military equipment we have, it's absolutely insane how big the thing is. It's huge. So to close this video off, what I decided to do was put up that scene again of the Death Star appearing above the horizon. I just really like that shot. But I put it further back. Again, the previous one, it was a lot closer. Here I've put it the distance that it would be, the diameter of the moon. So I'll put it as how it would look if it was 3,470-ish kilometers away. And it's still massive, like it's still crazy big. But yeah, that's how far away it is in this shot now. And so I just, this were just a really cool video to make, and to sort of delve into it a little bit. Is my maths perfect? No, not all. So if anyone's watching this and they're a mathematician and they start pulling me up on it, yeah, I've at it. I'm not a mathematician, but again, it was just fun to sort of have a look at what this thing would be like in the real world, in our universe. And it were a lot of editing with this. So if I've got you here and you're watching this, I really hope you can drop me a like, drop me a subscribe. Please throw a comment in there telling me what your thoughts are on this. Any other future stuff that you might want me to try and put together as well, feel free to throw ideas my way. But other than that, again, really enjoyed it. I hope you did, and I will see you in the next one.